Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Final checks and mics. It's on the other one. This is it.
Oh, that's the question mark?
Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Excuse me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you hold this? 1 second. Can you just hold this for sure? Check 1, 2, 3. Actually, hold that again. Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10.
Yeah, it sounded good.
Good on sound?
Yeah, it was great. Thanks. Folks,
How do you get this one?
there we go. Folks, I'm Representative Jim Grenier, Sullivan County, and I've been asked to welcome Governor Christie and all of you to this event, and I hope we all have a very informative time.
All right.
Joe?
I'm your Executive Counsel, Joe Kennedy. I'm going to introduce the Governor of New Jersey here. But before we start, we should know a little bit about him. Obviously, he was born in Newark, New Jersey. Was elected governor to New Jersey 2010. But a little bit about him. He's a New York Mets fan. And that's okay. We can deal with that. We won't talk about 1986. Billy Buckner likes. But he also likes Bruce Springsteen. And he loves to go to his concerts. So he's the everyman guy. He's married to his wife of almost 20 years, Mary Pat, and 4 wonderful kids. And the thing about Governor Christie that you really need to know is leadership. If you look at his background, being a U.S. attorney, being the governor of New Jersey, everywhere he's been, whether it's been the head of the Republican Governors Association, he has been in a leadership role. Someone who's willing to take on prosecuting terrorists after 9/11, someone who's been willing to work on tough budgets in New Jersey, someone willing to work across the aisle. He's absolutely a phenomenal leader, and he's not afraid to give his opinion, to tell you what needs to happen to turn around this country. So with that, I introduce you, give him a warm New Hampshire welcome, Governor Chris Christie.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you for coming today. Thanks for the leadership you're providing here in New Hampshire. I am happy to be back here and appreciate very much your introduction. I really appreciate all of you being here today. We did a town hall meeting last night in Keene at a place called the Lab and Lager. Yeah, it's a good place, and I always do better in town hall meetings when people start drinking. It's a good thing. I become immediately more charming and more informative. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy all of you took the time to be here on this Tuesday afternoon, and I appreciate a number of the folks who I see here, at least a few who are repeat offenders. You have come back to hear some more, and that's a good thing. Listen, a couple of things I want to talk to you about off the top, and then I want to spend the majority of the time on your questions for me. A couple right now I need to talk about and to confront. First is that national security has become a more and more important issue in this race every day, especially important in the last 2 weeks. As 2 weeks ago today, the President of the United States got on television at 7 o'clock in the morning and told all of us that he had reached an agreement with Iran on nuclear weapons. And I can tell you, in a presidency that I think has been generally very disappointing, we're going to look back on that moment 2 weeks ago as the very worst moment of the Obama presidency. And the reason I say that is because it has turned the world from a national security perspective regarding nuclear arms on its head. For 70 years, ourselves, the Soviets, then the Russians, were able to have a pretty decent control over the expansion of the nuclear family and maintaining a mutual assured destruction and deterrence from other folks getting the weapon, and for those of us who have it, from using it. Now, this president has entered an agreement which I believe will absolutely lead to Iran being a nuclear power. And this is something that is absolutely not in the national security interest of the United States, or in the national security interest of our best friend in the Middle East, Israel, or quite frankly, in the national security interest of a number of the Arab countries in the Middle East, like Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. All those countries now, those 4 Arab countries, are now going to, you have to believe, start to consider getting nuclear weapons themselves. either buying them from another nuclear country or developing them themselves. Because they know that in the glide path of a number of years, even if Iran complies with the agreement the president has signed, that they will be right on the edge of breaking out and becoming a nuclear power. Why is this important to all of us? Because this agreement, on top of not accomplishing what we set out to accomplish, which was to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear power ever. On top of it, what it does is in 5 years, it lifts the conventional arms embargo against Iran. In 8 years, it lifts the embargo against technology that will help them to develop intercontinental ballistic missiles. You don't need those to deliver these weapons, by the way, to Jordan or Egypt or Israel. Intercontinental ballistic missiles are used to deliver them here. And this president's willingly doing this. But the worst part of the last 2 weeks is when our president looks us right in the eye and lies to us. And that's what he's done. You remember 2 weeks ago today, if you saw the speech or excerpts of it afterwards, the president said, we don't have to trust the Iranians. This agreement's not built on trust, it is built on verification. He said that we have anytime, anywhere access to Iranian sites. Anytime, anywhere access. He said it a couple of times. One of his aides said 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week access. That would make you feel pretty good, right? You hear the president say that and say, we can go anywhere we want in Iran, anytime we want. It's a good thing, except it's absolutely not true. When you look at the agreement, we can ask to go anytime, anywhere. That part's true. We can ask. But if the Iranians object, we don't get to go. And then it goes to an arbitration panel where Iran has a vote. And then the arbitration panel has 24 days to make a decision about whether our request to inspect a particular place is appropriate. Now listen, I'm a former prosecutor. I spent 7 years as the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. This procedure is what it would be like if, when I was investigating a crime, I developed probable cause against a particular person. And I went to the court and I said, can I get a search warrant to search this person's house? And the court said, yes, you have probable cause. You can have a search warrant. I get the search warrant. I go to their house. I knock on the door and I say, listen, I have a search warrant. I believe you're engaged in criminal activity. And I'll be back here in 24 days to search your house to see if there's any evidence of that criminal activity. You would have to be the stupidest criminal in New Jersey to keep that evidence there 24 days later. And by the way, we in New Jersey pride ourselves in having some of the stupidest criminals in America. And even with really stupid criminals, if you gave them 24 days to get rid of the evidence, they're getting rid of it. And here's the bad news, everybody. The Iranians are not stupid. Not by a long shot. Not by a long shot. And so we'll play hide the ball with them for years. They'll cheat, as they've already done during the framework for this agreement. They'll cheat. We'll try to catch them. They'll move the ball. We'll find them again. They'll cheat. They'll move the ball. And the entire time they'll continue to develop a nuclear capability that is going to allow them to have weapons. Now, I don't know what the president sees that I don't. But I've been watching these folks, as you have, many of you in this room, for the last 36 years. Ever since they overthrew the Shah and they took our hostages. And we watched them hold our hostages for 444 days. We watched them burn the American flag. We watched them chant death to America. We listened to them say that they wanted to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. And the president somehow thinks that these folks have changed their stripes, that if we're nice to them, we're going to get credit from them later on and they're going to change their behavior. See, how some people think the president's naive. I don't. I don't. I think he suffers from a much different disease. He suffers from the disease of believing that he is the smartest person in any room he walks into. And that what everybody else sees, what Henry Kissinger sees, what George Shultz sees, what Jim Baker sees, what all these great foreign diplomats to foreign countries from our country are saying about this agreement, they're all wrong, and he's right. They can't see what he sees. This is a dangerous trait for a leader, to believe that you're the smartest person in the room every day. And it has led to him making a decision that's not in the interest of the American people. And this is why I've said the Congress needs to do their job. Our founders set up the checks and balances system in our government to say, if the executive's overreaching, it's gone off the rails, well, Congress is there to hem them back in. And vice versa, if Congress has gone off the rails, that's why they gave the president the veto, to be able to get Congress back on the right path. The Congress has the ability to be able to reject this agreement, they should. And here's another interesting thing about the president, right? Mr. Open-minded. He said in that speech 2 weeks ago today, he said, I welcome a robust debate in Congress about this agreement. And then 2 sentences later he said, and if they disagree with me, I'll veto it. So much for welcoming a robust debate on the facts. He's made his decision. And if he vetoes their bill, turning down this agreement, Republicans and Democrats should come together to override that veto, because it's what's in the national interest. And they need to say to him, Mr. President, go back to the table and get a better deal. You know, I tell you, watching him negotiate this thing, I wouldn't let this guy buy me a car. Like, can you imagine? Goes in with Joe Kenny today to go and buy a car. And he walks into the sales, and he said, I'm here to represent Mr. Kenny. And he says to the car salesman, Mr. Kenny is not going to leave this showroom today without a car. Let's negotiate price. Well, you know what would happen then? Oh, poor Joe would be emptying his pockets, because the salesman knew he wouldn't leave without a car. You got to know in any negotiation, whether it's buying a car or negotiating nuclear weapons agreements or anything in between, they got to know you're willing to walk away. Remember what Ronald Reagan did with Mikhail Gorbachev in Reykjavik? Remember, that's a real leader. That's a person who knows how to negotiate. Ronald Reagan said he learned those negotiating skills as head of the Screen Actors Guild. He said, I negotiate with those greedy studio owners all the time. He said, I know what it's like when people are trying to drive a bad deal. Ronald Reagan understood that no deal is better than a bad deal. And he walked away from Reykjavik. And he took a lot of abuse back in this country for it, from some corners. But what happened a year later? A year later, Gorbachev was back at the table, and they made a better deal for America, a good deal for America. If I were president, that's what I would have done. I would have walked away. Would have walked away from the table and said to the Iranians, you stay under these sanctions, you continue to see your economy crippled, and when you're serious about a fair deal for the Iranians and a fair deal for the United States and the rest of the world, you have my number, call me back. Until that time, I got plenty to keep me occupied in my country. They needed a deal, everybody. We wanted a deal, but they needed a deal. And when the other side needs a deal, you should not give away the store, and that's what the president did. He's made this world a much more dangerous place for our citizens going forward, for the citizens of Israel going forward, and for the next president, who's going to have a lot more difficult decisions to have to make in a much more dangerous and unstable world than the one that Barack Obama inherited. And if you don't believe me, you are here for a historic moment. I think for the only time in my political career, I'm gonna quote Jimmy Carter. Right? Hang on. I'm gonna have to brace myself here against this stool. But Jimmy Carter actually got something right. It's like Halley's Comet. But he actually got something right. I saw him on TV a couple of weeks ago. He was at the Aspen Institute in Colorado. He was being interviewed by Walter Isaacson. And they asked him about Barack Obama's foreign policy, a president of his own party. And here's what Jimmy Carter said. He said, I cannot think of one country that we have a better relationship with today than we did the day he became president. That is quite an indictment from a president of your own party. And it's true. Well, it may be not completely true. I can think of one country, Cuba. Cuba is one country we have a better relationship now than we did 7 years ago with Barack Obama as president. So we have a lot to work on, and we need strength and resolve and directness so that our allies understand when we say we're your friend, we stand with you no matter where the polls move here in the United States. And for our adversaries to know that there are limits to our patience. I don't want America to be the world's policeman. I'm not looking for fights around the world. But I also know that what makes sure we don't have war is American strength and resolve. That's what deters war. And what we've seen over the last 7 years is American weakness and American vacillation leads to other countries deciding they can afford to be aggressive and there'll be no cost. And that's why we have wars in Syria and Iraq and in Libya, why we have martial law in Egypt, why we have wars in Yemen. You look around the world, the old Soviet Union is trying to be put back together by Vladimir Putin. He's taken Crimea, now he's marched into Ukraine. Do you think all these things would be happening if we had a strong, resolute President of the United States who had not built the military down but kept the military up where it needed to be? I'd suggest to you that we wouldn't. These folks would know that they couldn't take that chance because they'd be afraid of American response. We need to get back to that in this country. It will make our country and the world more secure. Second thing I want to talk to you about before we go to questions is turn back to home and away from the rest of the world. And the crisis that's facing us here at home, we have to deal with entitlement reform, everybody. We have to. We just have to. And let me give you some numbers to make you understand the depth of the problem. Right now, the federal budget, 71% of every dollar we spend in the federal government is on entitlements and debt service. 71%. 55 years ago when Jack Kennedy was elected president, 26% of the federal budget was spent on entitlements and debt service. We've now completely flipped it around. From a 26-74 divide, now to a 71-29 divide the other way. Now, this is going to cause two problems for us. Problem number one is that these programs are headed towards insolvency. Even the Social Security Administration says that Social Security will be insolvent in 15 years. 15. But here's the bad news. They're wrong. Harvard and Dartmouth just did an independent study, independent of the government, and they say that Social Security will be insolvent in 7 to 8 years. 7 to 8 years. And so you wonder, you read the report, say, well, how could the government get it wrong? It's amazing. It's typical. Harvard and Dartmouth said, the reason why the government is saying it's so much longer is they have overestimated fertility and underestimated life expectancy. About the two worst things you could do when it involves Social Security, right? You've overestimated the number of people who will be paying into the system, and you've underestimated the amount of time that people will be taking money out of the system. And that's why they say it's 7 to 8 years. And so, you know, this is not a pleasant conversation to have. Especially not for a politician. Because nobody, you know, they tell politicians all the time, don't talk about entitlements. It's the third rail of American politics. If you touch it, you die. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to hug it. We're not just going to touch it, we're going to hug it. We have to. So if you go to my website, if you go to chrischristie.com, you will see my entire 12-point plan for entitlement reform. Here is the good news for you today. I am not going over all 12 points today. We do not want you to glaze over and pass out up here. But we'll go over 2 points really quickly, because they involve Social Security and Medicare, which are the two programs that people are the most concerned about. On Social Security, here's good news. Great blessings. We're all living longer. A lot longer than we used to. The average life expectancy for a woman now in America is 83 years old. And the average life expectancy for a man is 79 years old. Now, I see a few of you ladies smiling. I just want to remind you that 10 years ago, you had a 6-year lead on us. Now you have a 4-year lead on us. We are gaining on you. So that 4-year vacation you were anticipating for the end of your life, 4 years without having to take care of us, it may be bad news for you. We keep gaining at this pace. In 20 years, you're going to be stuck with us for your whole life. But right now you got to lead. You got to lead on us for 4 years. See, the problem though is, well, that's a great blessing, and the quality of our lives have increased as well, with the length of them. The problem is that these programs were designed for a time when people's life expectancy was in their 60s. And so if we're living 15 to 20 years longer, that's 15 to 20 more years of people pulling out of the system. And we have fewer young people paying into the system than we used to. So people are having fewer children. That's a math problem, everybody, that we can't get around. So my suggestion is this, that we raise the retirement age 2 years, and that we phase it in over 25 years. So I want everybody to listen really carefully now, because when Hillary Clinton runs the commercials next year against me, and she says, you know, Chris Christie is throwing grandma and grandpa off the cliff, I want you to remember, 2 years phased in over 25 years. That means 1 month of increased eligibility every year for 25 years. The world is not going to stop spinning on its axis. People who are on Social Security now will not be affected at all. People that are about to go on Social Security will be affected minimally. But the people who will really help is our children, because we're going to lengthen the ability for them to be in this program and be able to make it viable. Second thing that I think we need to do is to means test Social Security. So let me tell you exactly what I mean by this. If you have $4 to $5 million saved when you retire, not your home, liquid assets that you've invested, and it throws off $200,000 in retirement income a year. So you've retired, this is money coming from your investments, from your savings. If you have $200,000 a year or more in income, my question for you is, do you really need that Social Security check? If in retirement you're making $200,000 a year or more, my suggestion to you is you don't. You don't need it. It will not markedly change your lifestyle, your standard of living. But that check will make a big difference to somebody who's been working their whole lives and paying into the system and hasn't been as fortunate as you've been. And that'll make the difference for them between heat and rent and food. See, Social Security was designed right from the beginning to be just that, security. That if you worked hard and played by the rules your whole life and you paid into the system, that we said to you in return, America will not let you grow old in poverty. That's still what we should be focused on. That is the most important part of this. And if you're making $200,000 a year in retirement income, first of all, God bless, great job. You earned it, you worked hard, you deserve it. But second, it was this country that gave you the opportunity to do that. The freedoms, the liberties of this country gave you the opportunity to turn your hard work and your good ideas into financial security, like no other country in the world gives their people an opportunity to. So now in return, what are we going to do? Are we going to let people grow old in poverty? Are we going to let this thing go insolvent? Or do we want to pay much higher taxes right now and give the government even more money? I don't think that's the alternative. And so for those people who've been very fortunate, we're going to ask them, go without your Social Security check. Now, listen, I had a guy, this is my 16th town hall meeting, or 17th? Which one is it now? Where's my staff? 16, 17, what is it, Matt? 15? It just feels like 16 or 17. All right? It's my 15th town hall meeting. The first one was at a place called Shooter's Pub in Exeter. Another place, you know, people are drinking, so I do really well. And this guy got up and he yelled, he said, "Don't call it an entitlement. I paid for it. I put my money in, I deserve my money out." I said, "Okay, sir, that's a point of view. It's a perfectly valid point of view. But let me ask you this. Are there other things in your life that you pay for that you don't get money back?" He kind of looked at me and I said, "How about homeowners insurance?" Now, we all buy homeowners insurance when we buy our home. And we have that homeowners insurance so in case our house burns down or gets burglarized or some other covered event, that the insurance company's there to pay us the money we need to restore our home to the condition it was before. Now, for many of us, we spend that money on homeowners insurance for 20 or 30 years while we live in the home, and we never use it. Nothing bad happens. We go to sell the house. Do we go to the closing and invite the insurance company and say to them, "By the way, I was a really good customer. I made my payments on time. I never made any claims. Therefore, I would like my money back. And with interest, please, if you don't mind." After the insurance company gets done laughing, like you are right now, right? They'll give you a serious answer. They'll say, "No, you don't get it. What you got for the money you paid was the security of putting your head on the pillow at night and knowing that if there was a fire, if there was a burglary, that we would be there to take care of you if you needed it. That's what Social Security should be. And it's what we can afford it to be, and we better have it there for those people who need it. And I can tell you, I had a young man up here in New Hampshire who came to one of my town hall meetings at a VFW hall, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, Governor, I'm 23 years old, and I'm really glad you're talking about entitlement reform. He said, because, I just started work and I got out of college. He said, I see that FICA tax on my pay stub, and I shake my head because I know Social Security won't be there for me. At 23 years old, he believes there's no way Social Security is going to be there for him. We need to change that around. We need to change that around, and we need to do it by addressing this problem honestly. Now, when I came out with my plan, Governor Huckabee immediately jumped in and criticized me. He said, if Governor Christie's plan were to pass and become law, it would be a ratification of lying and stealing by the government. Okay? I got a message for Governor Huckabee. The lying and stealing has already happened. It's already happened, right? They tell you there's a Social Security trust fund. Baloney. They're taking your payroll taxes that you pay in now, they're spending it on other things, and you know what's in Al Gore's lockbox? You remember the lockbox from year 2000 up here in New Hampshire, right? You guys know this history. You know what's in Al Gore's lockbox? A stack of IOUs. All right, the lying and the stealing has already occurred, so let's stop lying to each other. Let's stop pretending. We know this is a problem. You all know it. As I've walked around New Hampshire and spoken to people about this, I get more nodding heads back at me when I talk about this because in your gut, you know it's true. Nobody likes to talk about it. It's an unpleasant subject. But what's going to be more unpleasant are the huge tax increases to sustain this or the insolvency of the program and the people who will then have to grow old in poverty. That's not right. That's not who America is. We take care of those who are least fortunate, especially those who worked hard and paid into the system. We got to take care of those folks. And same thing on Medicare, by the way. Increase the eligibility age 2 years, phase it in over 25. And again, that $200,000 a year or more in retirement income from your $4 to $5 million in investments. Instead of subsidizing your Medicare premium 75%, which is what we do now for those folks, let's subsidize it 10%. You still get a 10% subsidy, you still get your Medicare, you just pay a little more for it. I think it's worth it for you to get the medical coverage you need and to make sure that those who don't have the money don't have to go to emergency room as a charity case to get their care, where they'll get more expensive care to deliver and less effective care to help their lives. I don't think those are huge sacrifices to ask the American people for. They're significant, but they're not going to change the lives of the people that I talked about. And as we continue to get more medical advances and more pharmacological advances, we're going to live even longer. And the quality of our life is going to get even better. So we have to be prepared for this. Let's have the conversation. That's why I'm talking about it. No other reason except that it needs to be discussed. Because we can't afford to have a huge tax increase in this economy now. We can't. This economy is doing bad enough as it is. And by the way, people who raise this issue with me, and it's a valid question to ask, they say, why not take the cap off of the FICA tax? Because, right now, everybody pays the tax up to $118,000 a year, and then it stops. And if you make over $118,000 a year, the payroll tax doesn't apply. My response is twofold. One, I say for those people who make that kind of money, they're often the people who have the $200,000 in retirement income, so we're going to get them on the benefit side to make their contribution. And the reason I want to do it that way is I don't want to give the government any more money. Right now, they're spending it on stuff that you don't want them to spend it on and not putting it in the trust fund. What makes you think if you give them more, they're going to be responsible with this part of it, and they're going to keep it in that trust fund? They're not. We know this. So let's be smart about it this time. Let's make government smaller. Let's get the benefit hemmed in rather than give them a blank check and more money to the government. Doesn't make sense. I'd rather you keep that money. You spend it on what you think makes sense. That's what's going to grow our economy. Instead of all of you spending it, the government spending the money is not the way we want to do this. So those are the two things I want to talk to you about off the top. There's lots of other things. You go to my website. We have been the most specific and most detailed campaign in this election season. We have put out detailed speeches and plans on entitlement reform, on tax and regulatory reform, on the role of our military and our intelligence community, on education reform, and on reforming our criminal justice system. detailed things, not big like Republican adjectives. I'm for a greater America. Okay? So are all of you, I suspect. Unless we have some communists in the room who don't want a greater America, I suspect we're all for a greater America. I'm for more growth. Great. How do we get there? Listen, we Republicans are as guilty of this as Democrats. Some of our candidates speak in these big, vague, general platitudes that get big applause lines, and then where's the beef? How are you going to do it? We've taken a totally different approach. Well, I want America to be great again, but here's how I want to do it. And then you get to specifically look at what I'm going to say. So if you decide to vote for me, you know what you're buying. You know, because 7 years ago, everybody, a majority of people in this country bought a bumper sticker. Hope and change. Hope and change. Sounded great. Who's against hope and change? Wonderful thing. But we didn't know what the specifics of hope and change were. Now we do. Hope and change is about higher taxes. Hope and change is about bigger government. Hope and change is about the government taking over the healthcare system. Hope and change is about a huge stimulus program that got spent on the public sector unions. Hope and change is about weakness around the world and accommodation to hope and pray that people like us. If he had said that 7 years ago, I doubt he would have gotten a majority of the vote. So I'm being specific because I want all of you to know exactly what you're buying when you buy me. And if you give me your vote, that's what you're going to get. And if you go back to people in New Jersey, what they will tell you is we don't agree with everything the governor does, and we don't agree with everything the governor says, because it's a Democrat state. So you are looking at a walking, talking miracle. Okay? A walking, talking miracle. But what they will tell you is when the governor says he's going to do something, he moves heaven and earth to try to get it done. And when he says he won't do it, he will be tough and strong about standing his ground. And so that's why you need to know what you're going to get, because that's what I'm going to try to do. So there's only really one rule for the town hall meetings up here in New Hampshire. You raise your hand, I call on you. And you ask me a question. Unlike other candidates, you don't have to write down your question before you come in. Give it to my staff, have them read it, decide which questions I like to answer, and then that's the ones I get. And I say, thank you for your input. You know, no. What we do is all comers. Raise your hand. I'll take as many as the time will allow. We'll answer them. We'll have back and forth if you want to. I had great back and forth last night with a Trump supporter. So, you know, we had a good time last night at the Lab and Lager. And we'll do the same thing today with anybody who wants to ask questions. So let's get to it. Let's get to work. Raise your hands. Let me know what you want to ask. Yes, sir, in the back.
Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution outlines clearly the powers of the federal government. And the 10th Amendment, as you know, said if it's not specific in the Constitution, it
Reverts to the states.
States and the people.
Yep.
You mentioned education. That's only one example.
Oh, yeah.
Environmental protection is another one. And there's a whole list of them.
Yep.
Health. These things could be much better managed at the state and below that, the local level.
Yep.
School board meetings. Where do you stand on this?
I agree with you. As a governor, one of the most frustrating things about being a governor is how many times I have to say, Mother, may I, to the federal government. I was elected by the people of the state of New Jersey twice to do the job, to run their state. And I shouldn't have to ask Mother, may I. And the 10th Amendment is very clear about this. That's why I've said my solution on Obamacare is I would repeal Obamacare and I would replace it with a state-based system. Let the governors and the legislatures of each state decide which healthcare system is the best for their citizens. And let's take a perfect example of why the wisdom of the founders is something we should follow, right? Let's take our two states. New Hampshire has 1.3 million people, ballpark. You're spread out fairly well throughout your geographic area. A lot of people up in the North Country. And your problem on healthcare often, as has been told to me by residents of the state, is access based on distance. And lots of people have to go a long way physically to get to the kind of specialists they need or the type of hospital they need. And that's one of the biggest challenges New Hampshire has. Now, New Hampshire in a geographic size that's about the same as New Jersey. You have 1.3 million people. We have 8.9 million people in just about the same amount of space. We're the most densely populated state in America. We're the most ethnically diverse state in America. The challenges we have are much different than New Hampshire. We don't have distance problems for access to care. You trip over a hospital in New Jersey every 3 or 4 miles. I mean, they're everywhere. Right? We have lots of hospitals, lots of doctors. Our problem is cost. Our cost of living is so much higher in New Jersey, and that affects healthcare costs as well in our state. So what would make anybody think that the national government could come up with a program that would fix New Hampshire's challenges and New Jersey challenges at the same time? It is illogical. But the governor and the legislature in New Jersey and the governor and the legislature in New Hampshire, they can figure out what needs to be done here in New Hampshire on healthcare. And here's the best part of that. Not only do they have a better chance of getting it right, but if they get it wrong, you have a better chance of correcting them. You see, what, like 400 state reps in this state, right? I mean, we trip over hospitals, you trip over state reps, right there. I mean, they're everywhere, right? I mean, I love these guys. God bless you. But man, let me tell you, 400, right? But here's the thing. The thing is that you all have access to the people who are making your laws on a regular, easy basis. They live in your neighborhoods, they go to your dry cleaners, they go to your local delis, they're on your soccer and baseball and football fields. You get to see them. They get the chance to be accessed by you. So if they set up a healthcare system in New Hampshire that you don't like, you're going to be able to much more likely to get to them than you're going to be able to get to the Secretary of Health and Human Services or the President of the United States to complain. That's why you moved from New Jersey. Yeah, well, here you go. Mentum Township, I know where I live. This is now the second night in a row that we have someone who abandoned my town to come to New Hampshire. I'm not leaving, by the way. At least not until January of 2017. So we need to get to that. And you talked about other issues as well. This goes to the way this president's used the regulatory system, right? I mean, his own Small Business Administration now says that the cost of federal regulation for every small business in this country is $10,000 per employee. Think about that, everybody. That's not a tax directly, but it is money that's taken out of our economy and spent not to grow the economy, but just to comply with federal regulation. This administration last year issued 81,000 pages of new federal regulation in 1 year. In 1 year. So your sentiment is right, and that's, by the way, the last part of this answer is that's why we have to elect a governor president. Because governors understand the way to get things done. Governors understand. They understand the incredible effect the federal government has on people's day-to-day lives. And a governor like Ronald Reagan did will understand. Remember Reagan said about federal government, He said, federal government's not solving problems, the federal government is the problem. And he understood that from a governor's perspective of a major state who understood how much that impinged upon his ability to make decisions and how much it really interfered with the people's ability to enjoy their freedoms and to run their lives the way they want to. So I absolutely agree with that. I think Obamacare is the best example of that in the last 7 years, but there are plenty of others in the EPA and in other places that we could talk about. And that's why the first executive order I'm going to sign as President of the United States is to freeze any new regulation from any agency or department of government for 90 days, and then to send our folks out to find out which have been the worst new regulations that have impinged job growth and business development in this country over the last 8 years, bring them back, and let's rescind them and get the government off our backs and off our necks and out of our pockets, and let the governors and the state legislators do the things they need to do. And on education, let local school boards do it.
Yes, sir. Chris, thanks for coming. I'm a local New Hampshire person, but I'm from Baltimore. And you spoke about legislators, and here we have 400 and they don't get paid, or they get paid $100 a year or something. My sister's a legislator in Maryland, and she's very, very good friends with Larry Hogan, Governor Hogan, and she just, on the way over here, I told her I was coming, and she says, oh, Governor Christie's awesome, and Maryland's really changing now that Larry Hogan's in there. He's doing a good job. She said the morale is awesome in Maryland, even in the state government, because of the change. And I guess what I like to see is if we can do this in Maryland, what we've done, getting Larry Hogan in there, having you as president would really be awesome. Try to get some stuff done. And so if you can elaborate on that a little
Sure.
bit and what you see going on down there and how that's going to help the rest of the country.
Sure. Well, first off, I get a lot of people who ask me this. That's what this green bracelet is about. This green bracelet is about Larry Hogan. Governor Hogan, I'll tell you quickly about Larry Hogan. You know about him, but others may not. Larry Hogan's a lifetime businessman in Maryland. He was the Republican candidate for governor of Maryland in 2014. Now, this is Maryland, okay? This is like running for governor of New Jersey as a Republican. This is tough sledding. And I got to meet Larry Hogan, got to know him, and I believed, as chairman of the Republican Governors Association, that Larry Hogan could actually win. So we went down there. I spent a lot of time down there personally. We spent a lot of money down there. And Larry Hogan got elected governor of Maryland in the biggest upset of the night in November of 2014. And you're right. Everything your sister says about the way he's changed the attitude and the sense and the outlook down there by empowering people and pulling back some of this government regulation and taxation. How about this? Larry Hogan lowered tolls. When was the last time you saw anybody lower tolls, right? Larry Hogan lowered tolls in Maryland. But unfortunately, Larry's in a bit of a crisis right now. He was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And he is in the midst right now of his second round of chemotherapy. And it's a life-threatening situation to Larry. And, he is a wonderful guy who's, as you said, providing great leadership. And so these bracelets were given out by his supporters, and they say Hogan Strong on them. And for those of us who are his friends and his supporters, we're wearing these bracelets every minute of every day until Larry's done with his treatment. And we're praying like heck for the guy that he winds up being able to be strong and surviving it. And what it shows you is that character matters and leadership matters. As Joe Kenny said in his introduction, leadership matters. It is the single indispensable part of effective governance. You got to be able to effectively lead people. And that means grabbing that bully pulpit and speaking your mind when you need to and telling the truth that people don't want to hear. But it also means being able to bring people around a table and craft compromise when you need to also. Let me tell you something, everybody. Compromise is not a dirty word. And I had somebody, write to me recently say, compromise is capitulation. No, it's not. It's not. Capitulation is capitulation. Compromise is about sitting down with people that you all have elected and working with them to make sure that we move our country forward. Larry Hogan gets that because he wakes up every morning like I do with a Democrat majority legislature. You know what that means, everybody? I wake up every morning knowing I'm not getting what I want. I'm not getting everything I want. And I wake up, yeah, it's your problem too? There you go. And I'll tell you something else. What it also tells me is that I can't just go and stand in the corner and hold my breath and say, well, I want what I want. You got to reach out and you got to work with each other. It doesn't mean abandoning your principles. It means doing the job. You elect us to govern, not to preen and pose, to govern and to move our country forward. And one of the things I hear from folks all the time is how frustrated they are that Washington doesn't work anymore. It doesn't speak to each other, doesn't work with each other. Larry Hogan's changing that in Maryland. I hope that any of you tonight who are so inclined will just say a little prayer for him. He needs our faith and our support. It's a really tough disease, and the treatment is really tough. But he sent me a picture today where he's back at work. No hair, but back at work. The guy's a soldier, and he's a leader. So thanks for bringing it up. Tell your sister thank you, too. Well, he's a good man. I was happy to be able to help him. Every once in a while, you help a good one. That's a good thing. All right. Yes, young lady, right here.
My family and I are from Texas, so I'm wondering what you plan to do about the basic lack of the southern border. So, yeah.
Sure. Good question and important question, whether you live in Texas or whether you live in New Hampshire. It's an important question no matter where you live in this country. Here's a few things. I think there are four things we have to do to fix our border security situation. The first one is to build a wall or a fence in the places where it makes sense to do so. Now, let's everybody take a deep breath, okay? We are not going to build a wall across the entire 2,000-mile border of the United States and Mexico. It sounds really good. You pound your chest and you feel really good about it. And don't say, and Mexico's going to pay for it. How that's going to happen is also completely beyond me, all right? We're going to build a wall, and we're going to tell Mexico, you have to pay for it. But there are spots along the border where it would make sense to build a wall or fence. We should do that in those areas. Second, we need to have Border Patrol officers working with FBI, DEA, and ATF officers to interdict the criminal activity that's coming across the border. Because we have people who are running drugs and running guns across our border to commit crimes in our country. And so we have to have more of those folks on the border. Third, we need to have more electronic intelligence on the border, meaning drones and cameras. Because there are going to be areas that are difficult to get to. We want to be monitoring those areas as well. And if we see activity coming over those areas, then we can deploy human assets to those areas. But we don't want to keep them there all the time. It's just a waste. But when you can fly drones and use cameras to be able to do that, it makes perfect sense. And then when you see activity, you can send human beings to those areas to be able to interdict and intercept. And the fourth thing is, and I think this is the most important part, we have to require every employer in this country to use E-Verify. Here's why these people are coming, right? These folks are, I've met lots of undocumented folks in my state. And I have yet to have one of them come up to me and say, Governor, the reason I came to America illegally is because I wanted to vote. This whole path to citizenship stuff is nonsense. It's not why these folks are coming. They say to me, Governor, I came to America because I wanted a job. I wanted to work. I wanted to support my family. Well, if they now know that American employers are not going to hire them unless they come here in the legal route, it's going to dry up them coming across the border. Because if they know you can't get hired, you're not going to come here in the first place. And we have to wipe out the profit margin, and let's be honest about it. There are businesses in this country who hire these folks because they're cheaper labor, and they increase their profit margin. So what we need to do is, if you do that, we need to fine you enough that we wipe your profit margin out. Hire Americans and legal residents of this country to do the work, not illegal folks who are here. That way it will stop them. I'm telling you, folks won't come if they got no hope of being hired. But you got to use all four of those things. A wall and a fence where it's appropriate, more human capital in terms of Border Patrol officers, along with FBI, DEA, and ATF to interdict the drugs and the guns coming across the border, electronic surveillance to be able to look at the most difficult parts of the border and keep an eye on those, and fourth, E-Verify. No more jobs for people who come here illegally. Now, let's not confuse these things, okay? We still in this country, in my opinion, have to be for good legal immigration. My great-grandfather and great-grandmother came over to this country on a boat from Sicily. When their ticket was called to come over here legally, my great-grandfather was a mason. He wanted to come because he heard they were building in New York and New Jersey and that he could get work. And they so desperately wanted to come to this country to build their lives that when their ticket was called, my great-grandmother was 9 months pregnant. And she got on the boat. She got on the boat at 9 months pregnant, and she gave birth to my grandfather in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, this led to, a lot of fun for my mother. This was my mom's dad. She used to tease him all the time. She'd say, "You're nothing. You're not Italian. You're not American. You were born in the middle of the ocean." And my grandfather used to get so angry about this. Now my grandfather died when I was about 9 years old. And I don't have a lot of memories of him, but I remember these conversations because my mother used to like to really give it to him. And he'd say, no, I'm an American. When I got to Ellis Island as an infant, they made me an American. I'm an American. My grandfather and my great-grandfather and grandmother were proud that they came here the right way. They came here legally. They helped to build this country. And think about this. From the guy who was born on the boat to parents who had $10 in their pocket coming to the United States. 2 generations later, his grandson is running for president of the United States. We want that story to continue for this country, all right? So, we are not an anti-immigration party. We are an anti-illegal immigration party. We are not an anti-immigration party, and we've got to talk about that. There is no reason why folks who believe in doing this the right way should think they're not welcome in our Republican Party. They are, because I'll tell you something, most of the Republicans who run for president, their grandparents or great-grandparents immigrated here. So let's get real about this. Let's fix the problem that you raised, which is a really important one. Let's use those 4 steps to fix it, and then let's get on to having an intelligent conversation about how we continue to make our country a place where people can feel welcome to come to if they're going to work hard and contribute to our society as good citizens who speak our language, who work hard, who put their kids through school, and who make this country a better, bigger, stronger place, because that's what the world needs, a better, bigger, stronger America. Yes, young lady right there.
Without creating a huge debt.
Right. The question is, I'll repeat it. For the 14th out of 15 town hall meetings, I got a question on college costs. When I talk to folks, I tell them it's one of the really interesting things I've seen in these town hall meetings is how concerned people are across this country about it. And she's asked, how are you going to make it a reality for me? How's it going to be affordable for me without a ton of debt? Here's a few answers to that question. I'll take some water first, though. First thing is this. This is not a hypothetical situation for me. Mary Pat and I have 4 children. Our 2 oldest, Andrew is 21 and Sarah is 19. Andrew is about to become a senior at Princeton University. Sarah is about to become a sophomore at the University of Notre Dame. This year, the combined cost of their 2 tuitions for our family will be $122,000. Now, about 8-9 weeks ago, I got a letter from the University of Notre Dame, Sarah's school, from Father Jenkins, the president of the University of Notre Dame. Wonderful letter, right? First paragraph is something like this. Not exactly, but something like this. It says, we want to thank you for the blessing you've bestowed upon us by entrusting the soul of your child to our university community to forward their education. Right? This comes from a priest, right? So, from Notre Dame. You hear that first paragraph, all you do is close your eyes, you can hear the music from Rudy, right, playing in the background, right? You hear that music, you can see the Golden Dome, touchdown Jesus, the whole thing, right? I mean, the heart's pounding, like, oh yeah, God, my daughter goes to Notre Dame, how exciting. But he's a priest, so you know what the second paragraph is, money, right? So, the second paragraph says, and that's why we're so pleased to inform you that tuition will be increased this year only 3.9%. Now remember something, inflation's 1 to 1.5%. So we're talking about 3+ times the rate of inflation. Only 3.9%. The lowest tuition increase at Notre Dame in 40 years. Think about that. 3.9% annual increase is the lowest increase at Notre Dame in 40 years. He then goes on to say, total student cost for next year will be $61,750. Now listen, the problem is that they don't justify that expense to us at all. Right? I mean, think about it. The parents who are out here and grandparents who have participated over the years in paying college bills. Is there a more opaque bill in the world than the college bill? Like the bill from Princeton, where Andrew goes, which will be $60,500 next year, reminding me that he's costing me $1,250 less than his sister, and like taking a bow for that. It's really nice. It has 3 lines. 3 lines. It says tuition, room and board, other fees. $61,750, right? Now, if you all went downstairs to the first floor and had lunch after we get done with this town hall meeting, and they came to you at the end of lunch, and there were 4 of you, let's say, and they hand you a bill, and you flip the bill over and it says, food, $100. You'd call the waiter over, right? You'd say, hey, excuse me, dude, come here. you got to get a little more specific on this, baby. Like, what the food cost, what the drinks cost? Could you bring it back here for $100? For $100, you do that. You get that bill from college for $61,750 or 3 lines on it. You go, where do I send the money? Let me write the check. Here's a couple of things we need to do. First, you need, if you take loans, to be able to renegotiate your loans. Right now, the government's borrowing money at 3.5%. They're charging you 7.5%, 8%. We should not be making money off the backs of our young people. Just wrong. So you can renegotiate a car loan, you can renegotiate your mortgage if rates go down and refinance it. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to do that with your student loans. Second, we should provide every young person in this country with an opportunity for service, whether that be military service or other public service, to help to work off some of those loans, to help to get a credit for some of those loans by contributing the early years of your career to some type of service to our country, so that you don't have to worry about paying that huge bill ahead of being your first mortgage before you ever have a home. We don't want you to have that, so you should be given that option. But we need to do stuff on the cost side too. And here's what I suggest we do. First, they need to be much more specific in their bills. What are we paying for? What are the other fees? What are they going to? What's tuition really going to? We want it broken out more specifically, like you would demand it from the bill at the restaurant. We need to get that information. I think if they had to give some of that, there'd be somewhat of an embarrassment. When I was up here in New Hampshire and I had Sarah with me one time, I said, for instance, what if you found out that 1% of the tuition cost was going to build the new rock climbing wall at Notre Dame? And she like kind of grabbed my arm. She was sitting behind me. She's like, Dad, we already have a rock climbing wall at Notre Dame. So then I went to Iowa, and I was giving an education reform speech at Iowa State University, and I said to them, I was telling them the story about Sarah and the rock climbing wall. And there were a bunch of kids from Iowa State sitting behind me. I said, you guys don't have a rock climbing wall here, do you? They said, actually, we have 2. There's apparently an epidemic of rock climbing walls going on in college. What's that got to do with college, man? I mean, seriously. Now, it's one little, small, ridiculous example, but you know there's hundreds of examples behind that we would find equally or more ridiculous. They need to detail that. But secondly, they need to unbundle it. And what I mean is, let's say you want to go to school, and let's say you want to go to school here at UNH. And you decide, and your parents decide, you know what? I'm going to live at home. I don't want to live on campus. And so I don't need all these different things that go along with the campus life. Why should I have to pay for them? I want to pay for going to school, using the library, and going home. We should unbundle it so that you can pay it that way. That would be a market force on what they're spending money on, because if like 80 or 85% of the kids say we're not paying for X, they're not going to build X. If 85% of the kids aren't using the rock climbing wall, won't pay for it, well then they're not going to build it because they won't have the money to do it. Now people have said to me, well, how are you going to make sure they do this? Here's the way we make sure they do it, because there's always got to be a kicker. The kicker is, if you don't do those 2 things, you don't get to participate in the federal student loan program or the grant program. Students, you're going to use taxpayer money. Those students should be able to go to schools where they can get an honest answer and a market choice on their education. And if you don't want to take taxpayer money, then students who take student loans and student grants will go to other schools that will be transparent about it. We need to get market forces so that nobody's bragging about raising tuition 4% in a 1% inflation world. And they know in the end, and parents, you can relate to this. Now, we don't put market pressure on it either, most of us, because we can borrow this additional money, right? And so you say, okay, well, can you imagine if I'd said to my daughter, who, by the way, regularly sends me pictures from campus, look at this beautiful part of campus. Doesn't it look beautiful here? I love my school so much. She said to me one day, I love my school so much, I feel obnoxious about how much I love my school. I said, well, that's because you go into Notre Dame. So, and that happens, right? But here's the thing. You imagine me sitting down with Sarah after I got the bill? I said, you know, Sarah, if I said to her, I don't really think it represents a value anymore. So I want to send you someplace else that I think represents a greater value. Okay, so my 19-year-old daughter, right? After the crying and the you're ruining my life and her going to her room and slamming the door shut and all the rest of that stuff, right? What are Mary Pat and I going to do? We're sending her back to Notre Dame. If there's any possible way we can figure it out, we want our children to be happy and we want them to get the best education they possibly can. And I cannot deny that she is happy and that she's getting a great education at Notre Dame. So the market force is like, if this restaurant downstairs, if instead of $100, you got to bill us at $300 for lunch, you might say to yourself, okay, I'm not coming here anymore. There's 8 other restaurants for me to go to on the main drag that are more reasonably priced. That's a market force. We don't put that on college either. So we have costs that are going out of control. We have debt that's going out of control, and it's costing you more because we're not allowing market forces to work on the cost, and we're not allowing it to work on the rates that you pay on your tuition. So that's the plan I have to try to make it more affordable and to make it more reasonable for you to have to pay back your debt and give you options. What year are you, by the way? You're sophomore in high school? All right, so let's see. By the time you're a senior in high school, I'm going to be president. We'll see. It's going to be a close race. Maybe it'll help you for your last 2 years by the time we get the laws passed, all right? The gentleman in the back.
I don't know if I know how to use one of these. So, Governor, you're telling me in 8 years Social Security is going to be insolvent, right?
Harvard and Dartmouth's telling you that,
Okay.
yeah.
So I've spent my life working 6 and 7 days a week, going to work at 5 in the morning, sawing lumber, and I've saved some money. So if I make $200,000 a year, you want to take back what I've put in?
In retirement income, yeah.
Okay,
If you,
now
you got to
my
have $4 to $5 million bucks in the bank.
Okay,
and
now
if you do, God bless you, yeah, then I want to take it
Now, my
away.
retirement income, I pay most all my Social Security back in anyway.
Yeah,
Because
you
you
do.
make too much.
I do.
So you want to take what I've made in the past.
Or I could take it now. If you want me to raise your taxes significantly while you're working, I can certainly take it now if you'd like. I'd rather have you have it now, and if you've got $200,000 a year that you've worked for and you've earned, and that means you got $4 to $5 million bucks saved. So yeah, I'm going to take it, because if I don't, you got 2 choices. Either I take it from everybody, and the program's gone, or I raise taxes significantly on everybody to be able to keep you to get your check. And what you'll pay up front will be significant to be able to keep it solvent.
Okay, another question. When is
Yeah.
EBT going to run out of money?
Yeah? You tell me, when you think it's going to run out of money?
I've paid in my entire life. They haven't. When are they going to run out of money?
Yeah, well, listen, the fact is that the lying and stealing has occurred. I mean, I'm not sitting here telling you, oh, listen, it was all run fine. It was just a minor miscalculation. They lied and they stole. So now what are we going to do? I mean, I'd love to come to you and say, like, listen, I got a magic wand here, and I'm going to wave it, and I'm going to fix it. And you're going to get everything that you're entitled to get. And you know what? For most of the people in the country, that is what's going to happen. Because the overwhelming majority of people who retire are going to retire with less than $200,000 in retirement income. So they're going to get what they paid for.
I want to tell you one thing. I had a bucket list, and one of them was to get my first Social Security check. I did. I will never get back what I paid in.
Oh, sir, depending on how long you live, you'll get much more than you paid in.
You and your cohorts in Washington squandered it.
Well, first of all, I've never been to Washington, so I don't have, so I don't know what you're talking about. And secondly, if you live to a normal life expectancy, you will take out significantly more than you paid in. Significantly more. It's not even a question. It's not even up for debate. You will take out much more than you ever put in, because the concept is they've got the money up front, they're investing the money, so you're getting not only what you put in, but what they're making over that period of time. That's the concept. So don't tell me you're not going to take out anywhere near what you put in. Go back and do the math. Now, if you live to the male life expectancy of 79, and you've already taken your first check, you're going to take out a heck of a lot more than you ever put in. I'm not begrudging you that. But what I'm saying to you is there are choices to be made now. You can be angry about it. You can say it's unfair. And I would agree with both your anger and your characterization of unfairness. But guess what? This is what we've inherited based upon previous bad choices. And by the way, we're responsible for some of that, because we have rewarded people who have been unwilling to have this conversation with you. This problem's been coming for a long time. And a lot of people, both parties, haven't been willing to have the conversation with you. So, you know what? You can make a choice. You either be mad at the person who's having the conversation with you, or you can be mad at the people who refuse to have the conversation with you. You can be mad either way, but it won't change the math. The math is what it is. And we now have to try to fix it. So I'm for trying to fix it, rather than ignoring it and letting it go bankrupt. So your premise is exactly right. And I've tried to answer you exactly directly. Darn right, I'm for taking it. In the hallway. Come on inside. Walk in here. Ask your question. Come
Hi,
on.
Sarah's lucky to have you for a dad.
Thank
And
you. I'll
you're-
remind her that when I get home
Yeah.
tomorrow.
And so, you know, she's fortunate that you're able to pay what it costs.
Yeah.
So I have a 25-year-old who's graduated from college, who has a $30,000 debt, student loans.
Yep.
We helped him, but he's still out with a $30,000 debt.
Yep.
Can you just speak to, because this young man lived in a tent for a summer so he could pay his student loan?
Yeah.
Because his credit is, what do you have to say to those young people who have already graduated and all they're making with a college degree is in the 30s, when in fact their loans and even cost of living? I have hope in you, and I feel that you're transparent and telling the truth. So can you speak to those
I can.
people? And to the parents who are trying to, I'm the Social Security geriatric parent too,
Yep.
who, so speak to those people who have these loans and they can't get the jobs.
Sure. First of all,
Thank you.
I want you to tell your son that I was one of those people. You know, now back in 1987, I had over $35,000 in debt, almost 30 years ago. And it took me 10 years to pay it back. And it was a burden, and it restricted me and my wife's ability to be able to buy a home, and deciding on when to have children and when we could afford it and all the rest of that. So first off, I want you to tell them that I can completely relate to this problem, because I had it. And my parents helped me with college, but they couldn't pay for my college. And I was lucky, I got some scholarship money and I got some grant money. And then I had loans that I had to take out to complete my education. So I understand exactly how he's feeling and the frustration that he feels about it. That's why, one, I said to this young woman, we've got to allow them to renegotiate the terms of those loans, both in terms of the interest that they're paying and in terms of the length of time they have to pay it back, if they want that additional time to help make it more manageable depending upon their job, and have options to do other things to be able to work off the loans. But the bigger issue that you're getting to is, you know, why do we have an economy that's growing at 1.5% or 2% that's not providing your son with the kind of opportunity that I had when I graduated in the mid-1980s? When I graduated in the mid-1980s, and so did my wife, we weren't worried about whether we were going to get a job. We were worried about which job would we pick that would give us the most money and the best opportunity for our future career. My son is getting ready to graduate next year, and he goes to a good school, and he's worried about getting a job. It's a whole different world. In the mid-1980s, if you were graduating from Princeton University, you were fighting them off with a stick. Like, you didn't have to worry about whether you were going to get a job, but my son has legitimate worries about that. So we have to grow this economy, and we have to grow the economy again like we did in the 60s and in the 80s at 4 or 5%. Because if you do that, income inequality will no longer be a problem. All the ships are being raised by that. We have an economy and a tax code right now that is built for the rich. Under this president, the rich, the wealthy have done better than they've done in any period like this in a very long time. Because the tax code is rigged for the most wealthy, who can use all these deductions and loopholes and have the lawyers and the accountants to figure out how to do it, when most of us use the standard deduction. And we need to simplify the code, lower the rates, get rid of I would get rid of every deduction or loophole other than the mortgage interest deduction and the charitable contribution deduction. And all the rest of them go. Listen, New Jersey won't like that too much because state and local taxes that we deduct now, they're expensive in New Jersey. But, you know, we have to trade some things off to create the kind of economic growth we need for your son, not to make a job where he's making in the 30s, but to make a job where he's making in the 50s. So that he can pay off those loans in a way that makes it comfortable, where he can have a decent place to live and a decent standard of living as he continues to move up the ladder, we hope, in his career. But what he needs to understand is that will not happen if the government's picking the winners and losers. If the government, like Hillary Clinton was saying the other day, one of the ways to grow jobs is we need to give people paid sick leave. I don't understand that. How did paid sick leave ever create a job? She said it's going to make it a better economy. She wants to increase the minimum wage. That doesn't help middle-class taxpayers. Middle-class folks are not making the minimum wage. If they are, they're not in the middle class. You know, we need to get to the real problem. The real problem is that we have gotten the government so in our pockets, so in every corner of our lives, that we can't breathe. And the economy can't breathe. They say no. Yeah, and that's why I said to this young woman that we have to permit our students the same rights that I have and you have to renegotiate our mortgage and refinance it, to renegotiate, and I know they don't have it, and if I'm president, they will. Because it's unfair for us to make money off of our young people when they're struggling, like your son is struggling right now, and he's working. He's working, and he's working hard, and all he wants is a fair opportunity to succeed. I'm sure you said the same thing to your son that my parents said to me. My parents said to me, Chris, if you work hard enough in this country, you can be anything you want to be. That's right.
He's got 10, 15, 20 kids like him.
That's right, young people. We've got to restore that to be the truth again. It's not that they're unwilling to work. It's like they say, we're working hard, we're getting nowhere. I worked hard and I got someplace. And that's what my parents told me would happen in this country. That's the hope and the opportunity we have to restore to this country, is to put it in their hands. Get it out of the government's hands, put it in their hands. Let him be the determiner of his fate. The sharpness of his ideas and the depth of his work ethic should be the things that determine his success or failure, not some government agency that's deciding, we want you to win, but we don't care about what you do for a living. We value what you do, but we don't value what you do. You should get a higher minimum wage and you should get paid sick leave, but you shouldn't. You should work harder. You should pay higher capital gains taxes. You know, Mrs. Clinton's campaign already is just a finger-pointing campaign. I like you, you win. I don't like you, you pay more. I mean, who are you? That's not the way this country's supposed to work. The ingenuity in our minds and the work ethic from our backs is what has always determined success or failure in this country. It should determine it for your son, and it should determine it for my son too. That's the chance we had. We got to give our people the very same opportunity in this country again, and not have the government be in our shorts every other day.
Hello, you're talking about how the system favors the rich, and I think this is pretty obvious that the system favors the rich because they have the power to pay off their politicians and get what they want, either through lobbying or donations to candidates in elections. And I was wondering what specific reforms you would advance to end the corrupting influence of money in politics?
Yeah, well, money's going to be in politics forever, and here's why.
Agreed.
We have a continental country with 330 million people that if you're running for president of the United States, you have to try to communicate to all of them. And that's never going to be cheap. Second, I'm not in favor of the newspapers, the TV stations, or whatever, giving that advertising for free. Okay? This is a free enterprise system, and they should be able to make profit that's fair and reasonable, just like everybody else. So we're going to have money in politics. So here's what I think we should do. Everything we've stabbed at with campaign finance reform hasn't worked. And here's why. Because the underlying premise of all those things was that somehow you could limit money from politics. So for instance, I'm running for President of the United States right now. I raise money to run a national campaign at a maximum of $2,700 per person. Do you know how many people you need to give you $2,700? So start doing the math. If a week's worth of television in New Hampshire, just New Hampshire, costs $1 million, think about how many people have to write you a $2,700 check just to pay for 1 week of television in New Hampshire. Now, my point to you is, every one of these laws on campaign finance is written by lawyers, and then the lawyers figure out how to get around the law after they write it. So for instance, in this campaign, my campaign's raising money at that small amount, but you know what? Every one of our candidates for president has a super PAC that they don't run or control, but that are run by people who support them, who can accept money in unlimited amounts, and who can't talk to the candidate about what they're going to do with the money, because that's against the law. So you'll see an ad from, whether it's my super PAC or Marco's super PAC or Jeb's super PAC, and maybe you won't like the ad. And then you'll come to one of my town hall meetings and you'll say, Governor, I saw this ad from the America Leads group that's supporting you, and I think it's awful, and I'd like you to change it. And I have to look at you and say, I'm sorry, I can't, because it would be illegal for me to have any influence or control over that. How ridiculous is this? Here's what I think we should do. Get rid of the limits completely. Let anybody donate any amount of money they want to any candidate, but in return, it has to be disclosed 24 hours later on the internet. so that everybody knows. You can go on a computer, go to my website, there's going to be a section on contributions, and you can see how much money each person gave to me and when they gave it to me, and then you can compare to see if, like, all of a sudden I got a ton of money from one industry, and then all of a sudden my views are starting to change on that industry to favor them. Well, then you can draw whatever inference from that you want about me. I think the corrupting influence of politics, as you put it in your question, of money in politics, is solved by disclosure. Because then you know and you can make an informed choice. Right now, you can't, not only, forget about it, the super PACs at least reveal who's donated. Then you have 501c4 groups that don't even have to reveal who's donated to them. So you don't even know who took the money. And you don't know who's writing the ads. All you know is it's not the candidate. This is the worst of the systems that we can have. It's minimal amount of transparency and minimal amount of accountability by the people who they're advocating for. So if all the money's given to me, and then I run all the ads, then if you don't like the ad, and you say to me, I don't like that ad, I gotta defend it. If I don't control it, I'm just gonna look at you and say, sorry, nothing I can do about it. So I think that that's the best way to go about this. And the best example of how it really messes up our politics is, you all remember Steve Forbes. Steve's from my state, and Steve desperately wanted Jack Kemp to run for president. He loved Jack Kemp, he believed in Jack Kemp, he wanted Jack Kemp to be president. He said, Jack, you run for president, I'll finance your entire campaign. I'm a rich guy, I'll pay for it. He finds out the laws don't permit him to do that, but what the laws do permit him to do is spend as much money as he wants on himself. So now Steve Forbes runs for president twice, and if Steve were here today, he'd tell you he would have never run for president, but if he could have given the money to Jack Kemp. But the laws didn't permit him to do that. So what are we doing? It's okay to spend it on yourself, but it's not okay to spend it on somebody else. It doesn't make any sense. So I agree with your premise of your question, which is we got to do something about this system. But my solution to the system is, let's stop trying to play games. Let's be honest about it. Make the candidate accountable for every dollar he or she collects, and then you can make them accountable for every action they take and every word that comes out of their mouth on behalf of their candidacy. And I think we got a better chance. You have something to follow up?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up is, do you think corporations and unions should have the same rights to donate as individuals?
Sure, I think anybody should be able to. Everybody in this country has a right to try to influence the political process. And the question is, are you going to be good enough as a candidate to be a professional ingrate? Because that's what you need to be as a candidate. You have to take people's money, and then if they ask you to do something that you don't agree with, you got to be able to say no to them. And that's what you have to do. It's hard. It's hard, but you got to do it. Because if you don't, then you sell your soul. And mine's not for sale. So.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I have a question that encompasses states' rights that you were talking about earlier.
Sure.
And the economy and health care.
All right.
So
I'm going to sit down for this one then.
Okay, because I'm wondering why, as the governor of New Jersey, you are saying nasty things about the marijuana initiatives in other states.
Yeah, because we have a federal law against it.
And why do we still have that as a schedule?
They get Congress to change the law. See, here's what I don't believe. So we're really clear on this. I take an oath. My oath says that I will enforce the laws of the state of New Jersey, or as president, that will enforce the laws of the United States. Not enforce the laws I agree with. Enforce all the laws. So we have a federal law on the books that says that marijuana is illegal in this country. Illegal. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. The president has decided, I don't like that law so much. I'm not going to get the Congress to change it, but I don't like it. So Colorado, you want to go and have marijuana for recreational use? Go ahead. And I'm not going to, as president, he's saying, I won't enforce the law that the people's representatives have passed and a previous president has signed. That's lawlessness. If you want to change the marijuana law, then go ahead and change the national marijuana law and say, you know what, it's up to each state. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But you haven't done it. But we're de facto letting it happen. That's lawlessness. And what that leads to, and I'll end with this and let you follow up, but what that leads to is everybody gets to pick and choose which laws they want to follow. So now we have questions about immigration around here, and people really nodding their heads concerned about immigration. How do you feel about sanctuary cities? You like that? Oh, well, what's the problem? Certain cities are deciding that they don't want to enforce the immigration law. And the President of the United States says, Don't worry about it, because I don't agree with that immigration law. So you don't agree with it? We're on the same page. Don't worry about enforcing the law. Be careful about how much lawlessness you're willing to invite, because we have a system, laws get passed by a Congress or a legislature, the executive signs them, they become the law. They signed the medical marijuana law in my state at 3 o'clock in the morning I was sworn in. I didn't agree with it. I've enforced the medical marijuana law in my state, even though I disagree with it. People have access to medical marijuana in my state. I've now amended it to have children have access to certain liquids and other edibles so that they can use medical marijuana if a doctor prescribes it for them. I don't agree with this law. If it were up to me, I wouldn't have it. But I don't get to choose. When my predecessor, John Corzine, when it was 3 o'clock in the morning of my swearing in, I was the governor-elect. He was the governor. He gets to sign the laws until he's not governor anymore. So we cannot just pick and choose. And I'm not just saying it on the ones where the president isn't. I have proof of the fact that I've enforced this medical marijuana law, even though I don't like it and I don't agree with it. But it's the law of my state, so I got to do it. And so I would just be real careful about picking and choosing which laws you want to enforce.
Oh, okay, so I would actually like to follow up on that, because I'm surprised you're coming off as anti-marijuana altogether, and that doesn't sound like that's your position. But also, if you were president, would you go to the Congress and make sure that they took it off the schedule so that it is no longer properly labeled?
No, because I don't agree with it. I am anti-marijuana. You're misreading me. I don't know how I'm being less clear. I'm anti-marijuana. I believe it should still be illegal. And if I were president, I said this last night in Keene, if you're getting high in Colorado today, enjoy it till January of 2017, because I will enforce the federal laws against marijuana as President of the United States.
Okay.
So I am against it. But my point to you is that even though I am against it, we have a medical marijuana law in the state of New Jersey that was passed and signed before I became governor. I don't agree with it. I enforce it. I make sure that people have access to medical marijuana. We have, our Economic Development Authority has given money to build centers where it's sold. I've allowed people to be able to get prescriptions to go and get medical marijuana, and I've expanded the law since then to allow children to get certain edibles which were not permitted under the law initially. The reason I did it is because that's the law of my state, and it's my obligation to fulfill that law. But if I were president, I would not permit that to happen in these states.
So why are you personally against it?
Because I believe that it does damage to the brain, and I think there's plenty of evidence that proves it. I believe it's a gateway drug to other drugs, and I don't believe, given my experience in law enforcement, that it's the right thing to do. Other people can differ, but you have the right to know my opinion, and that's my opinion, and I've been firm and strong on that right from the beginning. I disagree with it. I don't think it's good for folks. I don't think we should be encouraging our young people to engage in it, and I think it's a gateway drug for other things. I'm not for it.
What about alcohol and tobacco?
Well, alcohol and tobacco are already legal, and I know this story from the marijuana people all the time. And what about cocaine and heroin?
Yeah, what about
let's make those legal too. How about angel dust and crack? Let's make that legal too. Let's everybody do whatever it is they want to do. Our society has set certain limits. We tried prohibition. People tried it, then they went back and they didn't do it. But it's all done legally. It's all done legally. So if you want to work on a bill to prohibit alcohol, knock yourself out. Go do it. You want to do a law to prohibit tobacco? Knock yourself out. Go do it. And we've prohibited tobacco in a lot of places. When I was growing up, you could smoke on an airplane. You could smoke in a restaurant. You could smoke anywhere. You can't almost smoke any place right now. That's fine. The public has decided that. Elected representatives have passed laws, and the executives have signed those laws to make it legal. If they want to change the law in Congress to make marijuana legal, let them. If I'm president, I'm going to veto it. I'm telling you right now, I will veto it. But that's my opinion. I'm welcome to my opinion, right? So what I'm an advocate for, Matt's right there. Oh, Matt, you can take that. What I'm an advocate for is compliance with the law. And so if there's a federal law banning marijuana, the people in Colorado should not be able to go and use it recreationally. If we allow alcohol, people can put whatever restrictions they want on it. We tax it much more significantly than we tax other things to try to discourage its use. We have lots of laws against its use that create harm, like driving while intoxicated, operating heavy machinery while intoxicated. That's the way society's supposed to work. So my problem with the president is he picks and chooses the laws he wants to enforce. So listen, have some guts. Have you ever heard him stand up and say he thinks marijuana should be legal? I've never heard it. I've never heard him say it should be legal.
No, but he said he's done it and he never did get prosecuted.
Well, good for him. By the way, I think there's probably any number of people in this room who have done something illegal that they didn't get prosecuted for. Does that in fact then justify doing it again? I mean, just count your blessings he didn't get caught, right? I mean, and that's what he should do. He should count his blessings he didn't get caught. Because if he'd gotten busted, it'd probably be less likely he'd be president of the United States. Maybe that'd be better for everybody.
Yeah, sure. You've talked a lot about waste during this entire presentation, and I'd like to bring it back to military issues.
Sure.
Seems like we're stuck right now in a cycle of endless war, which goes along with huge cost overruns for military spending. So who sacrifices? People in the armed forces sacrifice. The veterans sacrifice. Their families sacrifice. The taxpayers carry the load. The defense contractors who are driving the cost overruns go laughing all the way to the bank. And that gets back to this young man's question. Now, as president, what specifically would you do to get us out of that cycle?
Well, first of all, you have to demand accountability. I was talking with a group of veterans yesterday, and weapon systems that are ordered first have to be ordered based upon actual need and usefulness of those weapon systems, and they have to be delivered at cost and on time. And if they're not, you should have provisions in each one of your procurement contracts to penalize that contractor for not delivering it on time or not delivering it at cost. So that's the first thing. All these things are fixable based upon accountability. Second thing is that we've got to make sure that we're clear about what we're doing in terms of spending. Military spending has gone down, not up in this administration. It's gone down. The Navy is headed towards a 260-ship Navy. The president has recommended a 50% reduction in the Air Force. He just once again recommended another reduction in troop levels for active duty Army. Another 40,000 fewer troops. This president has gone down the path of diminishing and depleting our military. And part of the problem with that is, it's a perfectly acceptable choice philosophically, if that's what you want to do, but part of the problem is the rest of the world's seeing that too. The rest of the world is seeing our diminished and depleted military, and there's no way I'm going to be convinced that some of the conduct that's going on in the world is not driven in part by the fact that they know we can't deliver on the threats the president makes. So when the president says, I'm drawing a red line in Syria, and if Assad uses chemical weapons, we will take him out. Then he uses chemical weapons and he kills 220,000 of his people. And we do nothing, despite the fact that the President of the United States promised the world that if he used them, we'd take him out. I think part of that's the President's overall philosophy, but I think part of it is that he didn't have the ability to deliver on that threat. I think that's a problem for the United States to be in that position. So I don't disagree with your statements on waste and holding defense contractors accountable. Absolutely should be held accountable for delivering weapon systems that work on time and at budget. And if they don't, they should be penalized for it. But that's fixable if you're willing to do that. If you're not willing to do it, then it's going to run amok. And so I agree with what you're saying. As president, I would absolutely require in procurement contracts performance targets that you have to hit. And if you don't, that there are financial penalties that hit you and hurt you if you don't meet your deadlines. You have something you want to follow up with?
On that?
Yeah.
I imagine you've talked to a lot of people about this subject, but I'm going to recommend two.
Sure.
And one of them is right here in New Hampshire. The first is a lady named Sandy Smithberger. She's with the Center for Defense Information in Washington, D.C. And the other, who lives in Lebanon, is a guy named Robert Siviak, with whom I've talked. Siviak managed arms control issues for the Department of Energy and the Office of Management and Budget under the first President Bush and President Clinton. He's good, and he doesn't hide. All you have to do is open up an area phone book, and he's listed. You could call him on the phone if you're so inclined. So I pass that along.
Thank you. And if you would, if one of the guys on my staff would get those two names, because I won't remember them off the top of my head, and they can write them down so I can.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Appreciate
Sure
the help.
thing.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for raising the issue. Yes, sir, right there. What about term limits? What about term limits? Totally, absolutely for them. Those you didn't hear, if you're over here, he said term limits, okay? Now, here's why. I have term limits. As governor of New Jersey, I have two terms. I'm in the midst of my second term. If I wanted to run again in 2017, I couldn't if I wanted to. I'm done. President of the United States has term limits, 2 terms. So what the Congress and the legislatures are telling us is that the governors and the presidents are dispensable, but they are indispensable. We have a guy in my legislature, Democrat, good guy, I like him. He has been in the state legislature for 41 years. Here's my message. Go home, man. Go home. If you haven't solved all the problems that you went there to solve when you first got elected in 41 years, it ain't happening. It's time to move on. In that time, he has served, I never counted this before, but he got in 1974. So he served under Governor Byrne, Governor Kane, Governor Florio, Governor Whitman, Governor DeFrancesco, Governor McGreevey. He then was governor himself as an acting governor for a period of time. Then Governor Corzine, and now me. 9 governors he has served under. It's time to go home. And what I think it should be is 12 years. That means 6 terms in the House, 2 terms in the Senate. You can't figure it out by then. You can't have contributed what it was you were there, sent there to contribute in 12 years, then you probably didn't belong there in the first place. Go there, do your thing, be a citizen legislator. Leave your business, leave your job, go to Washington, serve for 12 years at the most, and then come home. And I just believe that part of the problem in Washington is that people get enamored with these titles. They want to be called congressman for life. They want to be called senator for life. It's a nice gig, I guess. Someone asked me one time in New Jersey, would I ever run for the United States Senate? And I told them I would rather commit suicide than serve in the United States Senate. I just couldn't do it. I actually like getting things done. I don't want to be like, marking up a bill in the subcommittee. Well, here's the problem. They make the laws, right? So they pass term limits for governors or presidents, but not for them. I think it's a very hard thing to get done. And I think it's something that has to organically come from the people. Because if you're waiting for them to limit their time, listen, let's face it, our party promised term limits in the contract with America in 1994. And we had control of the entire Congress and we didn't do it. We didn't do it. So, and I don't expect the Democrats are ever going to pass term limits. And we failed the test in 1994. We didn't pass it. We should have. We didn't. So I'm for them because I think part of the gridlock in Washington is based upon the people who were there for much, much too long. They're not all the problem, but they're a big part of the problem. And if you can't figure it out in 12 years, good try. Thanks for playing. Go home. So I'm totally for them. Yes, sir, over here.
Governor, thank you for coming today. I'm a recent legal immigrant to the United States.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I was in a post office the other day and I saw a pamphlet talking about selective service. I've got a 12-year-old son. I understand he's required to sign up for selective service or face a $250,000 fine or 5 years imprisonment. I thought the draft went out with Vietnam.
It did. And we don't draft anybody anymore, but I think it was President Carter, I'm pretty sure, right? Carter put registration for the selective service back in. I remember acutely it was Carter because I was turning 18 then. So I was amongst the first people to sign up for selective service. I'm against the military draft. I don't think we need one. I don't think it works. And I don't think it's necessary given our current posture in the world. I think it's been allowed to continue to have the sign-up so that in case something cataclysmic happened, we would be able to start it up very quickly if the country needed it. But to be clear with you, I don't think there should be a draft. I don't think there needs to be a draft. I think our voluntary military has worked very well for us over the course of time since Vietnam. And, my 18-year-old son has now done what I did when I was 18 and signed up for selective service. But if I were president, unless there was the most extreme examples of a world war, I just don't believe we should ever have a military draft again. I don't think it's necessary. But thanks for raising it, and welcome to America.
I'm a big proponent of the E-Verify, and I would like to know how you would handle the existing undocumented workers here now with the E-Verify program, because that's almost like a self-deportation if all of a sudden you implemented that program.
Right. I mean, I think there are two problems, or two facts that we have to acknowledge about the current group of people in the country. And I don't care whether you put the number at 10 million or 11 million or 12 million, it's a lot, whatever it is. They're not going to self-deport, because many of them now have children who are American citizens. So the idea that Mitt brought up a couple of years ago about self-deportation is not going to work. Secondly, we do not have enough law enforcement officers, and I know this from my experience, at the local, county, state, and federal level combined, to forcibly deport 10 or 11 or 12 million people. So I think the American people are not willing to engage in that conversation about what to do about those folks till they have a president who's willing to commit to them we're not adding to their numbers. And that's why I think the sequence of this debate and discussion is very important. We need to have a discussion about that, an intelligent one. But first, they got to be convinced you're not adding to the numbers. American people, I think wisely, are not going to support new laws on immigration when you don't enforce the current ones. So I think first step is to enforce the current ones, but then we need to have an intelligent conversation about people who are not going to self-deport and who we neither have the manpower or woman power to forcibly deport. And so people will say to you, we're going to kick them out of the country. My only question is, how? Physically, how are you going to do it? What's the sequence? What does that look like? How's it going to get done? And so, for me, that's why E-Verify is so important, because we cannot add to these numbers. We simply can't. It's becoming it is already an unmanageable situation, and it will only get worse if we don't get to doing it. And this is, again, in response to this woman's, question. Why is the president not enforcing these laws? And I believe it's because he disagrees with them. And there's not that codicil in the oath. You don't get to only do the stuff you agree with. Listen, I opposed same-sex marriage in my state, and I vetoed a bill on it. We got sued. It went to the New Jersey Supreme Court. The New Jersey Supreme Court voted 7-0 that same-sex marriage was a constitutional right in New Jersey. Now, what do I do at that point? Do I then instruct every county clerk across the state, don't issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples because I disagree with it? No. I took an oath. So that's now the law in New Jersey. It's now the law in the whole country. But before it was the law in the whole country, it was the law in New Jersey. What do I do at that point? I give an obligation to enforce the law because you took an oath. And so that's where I think we need to be on immigration. And that's why the 4 points that I talk about are so important, because then I think the American people are willing to engage in intelligent conversation about how you deal with the two different classes of people. The ones who came here knowingly, illegally, and the ones who came here unknowingly illegal, meaning the children. Now, not the children who were born here, but let's say the children who were 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years old, and their parents said, we're coming to America. It's not like they can go, hey, I think there's a law against that, and I don't want to go. So I think you have to deal with those two classes of people a little bit differently, but we got to deal with them.
No, I'm a big proponent to secure the border. That's number one to me.
Yep.
And number two is implement that E-Verify. The fix seems very easy to me.
It's right there. But here's why. Here's the dirty secret as to why we haven't done it. We don't want to anger the business community. That's why. Come on, man, it's about money. It's about money, so let's be honest with each other. People getting all outraged about immigration, I agree, but let's be honest with each other. The reason we haven't used E-Verify across everybody in the country is because we don't want to anger the business community and we don't want to cost them money. That's to me, not a good enough excuse. It's like the gentleman back there is asking me about Social Security. He's not happy about it. He's saying, I paid in, why don't I get my money out? Well, on the flip side of it is, we can't then say, well, all right, we want to have a secure border, but we don't want to bother the business people from making the money they're making by hiring people who are lower wages. They got to be bothered too.
Is E-Verify law right now?
E-Verify is, but it's not required. It's not required of every employer, and there are not sufficient penalties. The real problem is the penalty side. Right? I mean, you can require people to do it. It's kind of like, it's kind of like jaywalking, right? You're not supposed to cross when the little man is orange. The little man's supposed to be, you know, the other color and saying, come on and walk. People walk all the time. Why did they do it? Well, I'm in a rush, I'm in a hurry, and by the way, if I get caught, what am I really going to get in trouble for anyway, right? Penalties matter. Penalties help to move conduct. And so, you know, if it was a $250,000 fine, like this gentleman mentioned, for failure to, you know, sign up for selective service, for jaywalking outside, believe me, everybody be crossing at the green and not in between, right? Everybody be doing the right thing. So the penalty is the thing I think that really needs to be changed. It's got to be harsh penalties based upon profits that you're making, and wipe out the profits plus. All of a sudden, everybody will get religion then. Yeah. Believe me, they'll all get religion. All right, I was told one question to go, that I could take one last question, which means I will take two more, because I want to show my staff that I am still the boss. This gentleman right here has had his hand up for a while. I'll give him my microphone.
Thank you. My name is Alfred Gilmet. I'm a Vietnam veteran. My question is this. Here, I'm choking up. Well, anyways, the money that the government so literally took away from the Social Security program for $2.5 trillion. This is a shame that our government would steal from this. Take a look around this room. How many young people in here? We're the backbone of this nation. I served 2 tours in Vietnam, and I'm told that they're going to take what I worked hard for and steal it, like they so literally done. I'm not saying you're going to do it, but I'm saying they got away with this for 3 consecutive presidents, and nothing has ever been done. Now, my question is this. When you get into office, should you get into office, is there any reason in the world why that cannot be taken care of before the 8-year system comes into play, that the government should pay back all money that they stole? Thank you very much.
Yeah, listen. What the government has to be obligated to do is to pay the money back that they borrowed, right? And make sure that the recipients are made whole for what they received, of what they were entitled to receive. Now, Social Security folks are getting paid right now, as you know. They're getting paid. They're getting their check. They're getting their wire transfer every month, and that's going to continue. What I'm saying is 7, 8 years from now, we could wind up being in a really bad condition on that. So we've got to make some changes to be able to meet the future obligations, because, as you know, the baby boomers are all coming of age now, of retirement age. The largest group of folks who are going to become seniors are coming of age now. And so we need to make sure that we deal with this and deal with it responsibly, because the people who spent a lot of time building this country, like you, who defended the country and helped to build the country after the Second World War, are now owed their retirement that they worked hard and paid for. And that's why I'm talking about this issue. You don't hear other candidates talking about this issue. That's why I'm talking about it, because I know how upset and angry you are about it, and you're just a representative of millions of Americans who are upset and angry about it. So let's talk about it. Let's make sure we deal with it in a responsible way, because just not talking about it, how many times did your parents tell you this, right? If you can't ignore a problem and hope it'll go away. That's not a plan, that's a prayer, but not a plan. We need to have more than a prayer, we need to have a plan. And that's why I put forward the things I did. And let me also say thank you for your service on behalf of our country. All right. That gentleman right there for the last question. You got a microphone, right? They got a microphone for you right there.
Thank you, Governor Christie.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. We talked today about foreign policy. July 4th this year, when the great leader had some of his pilots come over and basically do some unnecessary gestures to the people in California, the pilots in the air, let's say. How do you, as a leader of the United States, how would you combat that from basically Vladimir Putin taunting himself, and the same thing he's been doing, taunting himself? And current administration stands back and hands off.
Yep.
So I'd like to hear you.
Well, this started with Hillary
Clinton.
Thank you, sir. This started with Hillary Clinton and the reset button, right? Right. Hillary Clinton hit that big smile on her face, right? Hit that reset button with the Russians. What did we get? What we got was an emboldened, taunting Russian dictator. in return for us hitting the reset button with Russia. So first off, you got to wonder about her, right? No wonder about that judgment, right? So listen, I'm not going to be a guy who's going to sit across from Vladimir Putin when I'm president, pound the table, and yell and scream. Doesn't make any sense. Vladimir Putin's not a dumb man. He can get to be the leader of Russia by being stupid. So I assume he will understand that when I sit across from the table at him and I look at him and say, listen, we got to get back on the right track here. Don't test me. Please. It's not going to be good for the Russian people. It's not going to be good for the American people. You care about your people. You care about their safety, their security, their economic future. Let's work together. But I have limits to my patience. And I understand that President Putin needs to do certain showing off because, you know, oil's down at like 40, 45 bucks a barrel and, you know, the economy isn't what it should be over in Russia and he wants to stay in power. I understand all that. But he needs to hear a candid conversation from a president of the United States who he knows means what he says and says what he means. And right now, the biggest problem is he doesn't believe Barack Obama. I forget about whether he's afraid of Barack Obama or intimidated. That's not the issue. I don't want Vladimir Putin to be afraid of me. I don't want Vladimir Putin to be intimidated by me. I just want him to believe me. That when I look him in the eye and I say, Mr. President, no further. Stop now. Okay? I mean it. I want him to look in my eye and say, okay, I know he means it. He'll make whatever decision he's going to make. But he'll know I mean it. Right now, when Barack Obama says, I'm going to draw a red line in Syria and nothing happen, when he says, you know, we're going to deal with the situation in Libya and it doesn't happen, when he says we're going to destroy and degrade ISIS, and then he says, well, honestly, we don't have a plan for ISIS, right? By the way, we're not the only people who read the newspapers. So is Vladimir Putin. He looks at this circus and he says, come on, this is the moment. This is my moment to take advantage. He is taking advantage of a weak American moment led by a weak American president. The same way, by the way, the Soviets took advantage in Afghanistan when they had a weak American president in Jimmy Carter. The same way the Iranians took advantage in 1979 when we had a weak American president in Jimmy Carter. This guy is more like Jimmy Carter than any of us would ever have wanted to believe. And we're seeing different people on the world stage do exactly the same thing that their predecessors did 36 years ago. When did it change? When Ronald Reagan came into office and he looked across at these folks and said, not now, right? Not now. Ronald Reagan didn't start a war in this country. Ronald Reagan didn't start a war in this country. He didn't have to go around. Remember all the stuff they said? Because I remember Reagan was my first vote. I turned 18 in September of 1980, and I got to vote that November for Ronald Reagan. And you remember that campaign, right? He was the crazy cowboy movie actor who was going to put the world into nuclear war, right? You can't trust that crazy actor with his finger on the button. I remember all this stuff that they were saying about, the media was saying about him at the time. He turned out to be a president who contributed more to peace than any president in my lifetime. And he did it through strength. He did it by letting the Soviets at the time know, tear down this wall. We're for freedom. Trust but verify. Very simple, direct things that, I mean, if you ever want to read a great book, read the book that Ken Edelman put out recently on Reagan's time in Reykjavik with Gorbachev. They talk about how Gorbachev was exasperated at one point because Reagan said trust but verify so many times. And Gorbachev's like, I get it, I hear you, I get it. Reagan's like, no, you don't, because this deal is not trust but verify. So you don't get it. You hear me, but you don't get it. We need a president, again, who's going to be direct and plain and means what he says and says what he means. And that's the way the world will get back into a sense of greater order. But until we do, it is a very, very dangerous place. And we got to get that back. So that's the way I would deal with it. All right. So first off, thank you. Thank you for coming up. Thank you for asking your questions. Thanks for being so direct. Thanks for caring. I have people when I go back home to New Jersey after being up here for a few days who always ask me, like, what's it like? Right? Like, what's it like to run for President of the United States and go and campaign in New Hampshire? They've been reading about it their whole lives, right? And what's it like? And I say, here's the thing that you both won't believe, but need to understand as an American. It's the end of July of 2015, and I'll tell them, it's a Tuesday afternoon at lunchtime. And I had a group of people, standing room only, that filled a room in this town months before anybody's going to vote for anybody. It's incredibly gratifying as someone who's offering themselves up for president that you care as much as you do. And what I say to folks is, if you're cynical about our political system, if you're cynical about our democracy, and we've got a bunch of questions today, right, that express that cynicism, come here. You won't be nearly as cynical. You'll still have some cynicism, but you won't be nearly as cynical because you'll see all of you who care enough about this country to show up and to listen and to really try to make an informed decision in February when you're deciding who to vote for President of the United States in the primary. And as a candidate, that's all we can ask from you. Give us a fair hearing. Hear us out, make your judgment of us, and then let the chips fall where they may. So I tell people in New Jersey all the time, you would be really gratified to come up to New Hampshire and watch what these folks do. Last thing I'll finish with is this. We go to my website, you'll see all the specifics that we put on, but that can't be the whole story, right? It can't be. Because I'm not going to be able to anticipate, nor are you, be able to anticipate every issue that's going to come before me if I become President of the United States. We can try, we can talk about a lot of different issues, and we have today, but you're never going to be able to anticipate every one, because I won't be able to. Things will happen, both at home and around the world, that we won't be able to anticipate. So then what happens? You didn't get to ask me the question. You don't know exactly what I'm going to do. That's a nerve-wracking moment for a citizen. The only way it isn't, and the only way that you can make your judgment, I think, with all due respect completely, is you also have to know who I am. It's not enough to know my positions. You need to know who I am. And so I'm going to end by telling you who I am. Right? I'm not only a husband for 29 years to my wife, who I met in college, and got her when she was young and didn't know any better. We're not only the parents of 4 really great children. Andrew's 21, Sarah's 19, you've heard about them, but you have not heard yet about Patrick, who is 14 and a hockey player going into high school, and Bridget, who's 12, and a basketball player going into the 7th grade. They're great kids, and we're really proud of them. And it's the real unique joy of our lives to be parents. But really at core, who I am is like most of us. I'm my parents. I'm a product of my parents, for good and for bad. Right? You know, you become who your parents helped to mold you into being. And so I'm the son of an Irish father and a Sicilian mother. For those of you, what that means most specifically is that as the oldest child in that family, yeah, exactly, as the oldest child in that family, I became expert at dispute resolution at a very early age. There were a lot of good conversations in my house, and they were done at a relatively high volume. My mother, you'll not be surprised to know, ran the show. My 82-year-old father, who is probably watching, we're live streaming this thing, Dad's probably watching it. He's a great guy. He's friendly, he's outgoing, he's gregarious. If he were here today, he would be hugging you guys at the end of it, telling really embarrassing stories about me and all the rest. And he's just a very fun, happy guy. But I used to tease him all the time. I say, Dad, in the automobile of life, you are merely a passenger. Mom is the driver. Mom made the decisions. Mom set the rules. She was judge, jury, and executioner. Mom was in charge. And the main rule in our house was there will be no suffering in silence. My mother was like, you got a problem? You need to tell me. You got a grievance? Lay it out there. You got an idea? I want to hear about it. Something great happened? I want to know about that too. I want to know everything, and inside this house, everything needs to be told. I think she set this rule because she was the main user of the rule. My mother I'm telling you, no matter what was on her mind, it came out of her mouth. She never hesitated. And when we got to be older and we could push back a little bit, when we were younger kids, you had no choice. You just sat and listened. But when we got older, we could push back a little and say, Mom, enough, stop, all right, I get it. I hear you, I'll do better, I'm sorry, I'll get it. And she'd say, no, you keep quiet and you listen. I need to get this off my chest. There will be no deathbed confessions in this family, Christopher, you're gonna hear right now. And so we heard, and we heard, and we heard. And that's the way she ran the house. And it made a very interesting place to grow up at a very high volume. But, you know, my mom and dad had decided that that's the couple they were and that's who they wanted us to be. So my dad's retired now, he's 82 years old, he's a retired CPA, he's a veteran, he served in the United States Army during Korea. He raised us really well, and he's a wonderful guy, and I'm fortunate to have him. I really am. Fortunate to be his son, fortunate to have him around, to be able to watch all this. We lost my mom 11 years ago, and it was a tough, quick thing. On Valentine's Day of 2004, my mom was diagnosed with lung cancer. She was a lifetime smoker. And for those of you who've gone through this with family members or friends, you know that that disease can either go real quick or real slow. In my mom's case, it went very quickly. And so I was U.S. Attorney at the time for New Jersey, and by the end of April of 2004, just a couple of months later, I was at a national conference in San Diego, and my mom had been put back in the hospital. And my younger brother called me and said, listen, I spoke to the doctors, she's real bad, and if you don't get home quick, you may not get a chance to see her again. So I got on a red-eye flight that night. I flew overnight from San Diego back to New Jersey, landed at the airport, got in the car, drove to the hospital. Got there, and I saw my mom, and they had put her on morphine. For those of you who got through losing someone to cancer, you know that's kind of the last step, right? They're trying to make them comfortable. And so she was kind of in and out of things, and I was sitting next to the bed waiting for her to wake up. So she finally woke up, and it was so typical of my mom. She had not seen me for a week. I'd been gone for a week. And she woke up and looked at me, and it was like, no hello, or how are you, or how was your trip? She said, what day is it? And I said, good to see you, Mom. I'm doing fine, yes, good to see you. It's Friday. And she said, what time is it? And I said, it's 9:30 in the morning. And she looked at me, she said, go to work. I said, hey, Mom, you know what? I flew from San Diego overnight. I came to spend the day with you. I'm taking the day off. I'm going to spend it with you. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to work. She said, Christopher, it is a work day. Go to work. I was shaking my head. I looked at her. I said, Mom, what are you, like, afraid you're not getting your taxpayers' money's worth today? Like, I'll make up the time. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. I'm staying with you today. She reached over. She grabbed my hand. She said, Christopher, go to work. It's where you belong. There is nothing left unsaid between us. Outside the birth of our 4 children, it was the single most powerful moment of my life. My mom was looking at me, and she was giving me permission to let her go. And the reason it was so powerful was because as I sat there in those seconds afterwards, after she had said those words, I knew she was right. There was nothing left unsaid. She had taught me my whole life, no deathbed confessions, right? She had said, we're getting it all out on the table now in a trusting relationship. You tell everybody that you trust and love what you're thinking and you're feeling, and you have no regrets. And man, she was right. As loud as it had been, as tough as it had been sometimes, as much as I wanted to buy earplugs sometimes, you know what? She was right. And so I did as I was told. I got up, I kissed her on the forehead, and I said, okay, Mom, I'm going to work. And she said, good. And I left. And that afternoon, she went into a coma, and 3 days later, she died. And it was the last conversation that we ever had. And I have no regrets. No regrets. Because she was right, and she raised me the right way. And so as one of the most psychoanalyzed politicians in America, you know, when I tell people to get the hell off the beach, or to sit down and shut up, or some of these things that people say, why does he say those things? Why does he do those things? What does he mean when he says those things? It's her. It's her. It's her fault. It's all her. It's all her. That's the way she raised me. And I know that if she were alive today, to see this circus that my life has become, she'd have lots of things to say, for certain, but for 2 things I know she'd have to say. The first thing she would say, so, you're running for President of the United States, really? Mr. Big Shot. Running for President. I want you to remember something. I changed your diaper. I know who you are. Don't you go acting like a big shot with me. My mother would want me to keep my head on my shoulders and keep my wits about me. She wouldn't want me to change. And she would be the person who took it upon herself to knock me down a few pegs every time I thought I had a good day. That would be Mom. The second thing she would say to me is, listen, if you're really going to do this, you're going to ask these folks to give you the greatest degree of trust that they can give to anybody outside their family. And that is to give you their vote for President of the United States. Then, Chris, you better tell them exactly what you're thinking and exactly how you're feeling. Because in a trusting relationship, that's what we do. And so this is who I am and why I am the way I am. And, you know, for me, this is not only a way of being, because this is the way I was raised, it is in this effort a tribute to her. I want her to know, because I know she's watching. I absolutely believe that in my heart. I know she's watching me. I know she's seeing this. I wish she were here to see it. I wish I wasn't just imagining those words in my ears, but that I was really hearing them. But I know, as she's watching, I want her to look at me and say, he's doing it the right way. Whether I win or whether I lose, he's doing it the way I taught him to be. And so I have this whole list of things that I want to do for this country, and I'm going to add to that list over the course of the next number of months on issues that are really important to me and I hope important to you. But there's only 4 things I can really promise you. Promise you, because they'll be completely under my control if I become President of the United States. And here's what they are. You're never going to have to wonder what I'm thinking. You're never going to have to wonder what I'm feeling. You're never going to have to wonder what I'm willing to fight for. And you're never going to have to wonder how hard I'm willing to fight for it. All the rest of it will be influenced by other people. Won't be completely in my control. But those 4 things, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, how hard I'm willing to fight and what I'm willing to fight for, those are the things that I can completely control. And so if you give me your vote next February, I can guarantee you that's the kind of president you're going to get next January. And I appreciate you taking the time today very much.